Hello my dear friends, and welcome back to another very exciting Star Wars video. So today, 7 years after the movie's release, we have some pretty insane revelations from Ron Howard for Solo: A Star Wars Story, some interesting behind the scenes tidbits, building on things we already knew about, but also a few novel reveals, so this is going to be a lot of fun. Now at this point, sporadically over the last few years, I've made a handful of videos talking about the film, and why Lucasfilm, and I would say Kathleen Kennedy specifically, has a vendetta against it. It's the prime example of Lucasfilm taking away the wrong lessons from a box office flop, and as I've stated in the past, I don't think we're ever going to get a Solo 2, and that's a real shame. That's not to say they haven't done anything with the movie and the characters in it. There was a Qi'ra trilogy of comics, there's an upcoming video game and a tie-in comic to it, there's also the Lando movie, if that ever comes about, and possible tie-ins with Dryden Voss in the Maul Shadow Lord show, but no Solo 2, and the 2018 movie remains extremely underrated, at least according to yours truly. It was a fun film. When it landed in theaters though, it faced an uphill battle from the start, and it had nothing to do with the quality and everything to do with the timing. Released right after the controversial The Last Jedi, you might remember the viral videos of the empty theaters, and amidst the fan division, blockbuster fatigue and fierce summer competition, Solo really struggled. But despite this, to this very day in the year 2025, the movie does have its passionate fans, and Make Solo 2 Happen still trends to this very day. And there's also another important component. There was this overwhelming fan sentiment that we didn't really need a Han Solo origin story. So you pair that with the fact Alden Ehrenreich was fighting an impossible comparison to Harrison, you can easily comprehend how there were so many different things going against it. But it was still a decent film. And on top of all of this, there was production turmoil behind the scenes. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Ron Howard just opened up about the truth of what happened with Lucasfilm, the sequence of events, and how George Lucas inadvertently shaped a very important part of the movie. He even partially directed an impromptu scene. You see, my friends, Solo was a movie originally handed to Phil Lord and Chris Miller before Howard took over, and now speaking to Vulture, Ron recalls the reasons they left was down to creative differences. The familiar, vague phrase we all hate so much. The reason so many directors have walked away and parted ways with the studio, creative differences. The Kasdans were still the writers, but Kathleen Kennedy was not pleased with the original version of the movie. Why? Well, according to Ron Howard, it just came down to tone. He says, quote, "They basically said, we've reached a creative impasse with Lord and Miller.
Kathy, I apologize for wasting that. It's nice to be sure, though."
Kathy asked Ron, would you ever consider coming in? And he now recalls he looked at some edited footage and noticed the things that were really bothering them. He says they liked the script and the way it was, but there was a disconnect early on tonally. The tone for a Han Solo movie was off. And so Kathleen Kennedy was not convinced that Chris and Phil were doing their work effectively as directors. They just weren't the right fit. But Ron remained very down to earth, very humble about the situation. He wasn't there to put them down, to critique them, and so he says this, "I wasn't there to judge because I didn't see enough of it, but Lucasfilm was sure, they wanted me. Once I said, okay, I think I can do this, I understand what you want from this script, they replied, we want to do a lot of reshoots. So I looked at the whole movie and then pointed out some things that I thought were great, but then some things I would change. And Phil and Chris were incredibly gracious throughout that process. They saw I respected their work, but they were just seeing two different movies. My vision for Solo was not their vision for Solo. So I came in and I had a blast." And here I think Ron Howard is acknowledging that there were things he did like in the original version, but I think Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm wanted something very specific. And as we know, my friends, there were plenty of scenes that were deleted. There are well-documented sequences that never made it into the final cut. But now we move on to the big reason you clicked on the video. George Lucas was more involved in the movie than you think. There's this common idea he's very detached from the creative process on Disney Star Wars projects, but sometimes he's there on set. We know it's true for Mando, for the Ahsoka show Dave Filoni called him up for advice, and we also know, fresh out the cinema after Rogue One, he called up Tony Gilroy and Gareth Edwards to congratulate them. But did you know he was also involved in Solo? Not with the original version, but after Ron Howard was called up. And he now reveals George gave him some really interesting practical advice and consulted on the movie. The most pressing words of wisdom he got from the creator himself: just don't forget, it's for 12-year-old boys. George Lucas's classic quote, one of his long-standing guiding principles for Star Wars, something he's repeated over the years in film institutes, as the keynote speaker, in interviews for the prequel trilogy, this is one of his core messages about the franchise, especially when fans and critics alike went after his prequel trilogy. He used to repeat this quote: he was a firm believer that you need to make the movies primarily for them, for the children, and you have to give them hope. George said, it's a space fantasy for kids. Even if families and adults love the movies, love the shows, they are primarily made with children in mind. Keep the story accessible, simple tales of good versus evil, coming of age, families, about fathers and sons, and overcoming adversity as the underdog. Which I guess is why Andor is so unique. It's fantastic Star Wars, but the first one explicitly made with adults in mind. But it matters in the context of Solo because even the writers, the Kasdans, have mentioned Lucas's mantra, and you can see it in Solo's DNA: swashbuckling heists, banter, clear motivations, and a sense of, I would say, pulpy fun. It would have been great to see darker criminal underworld vibes, but if Kathy wasn't gonna allow it, it was never gonna happen, no matter who the director was. But that's not the only contribution of George. He gave his advice on one scene between Solo and Qi'ra, their romantic chemistry, which might sound ironic, considering George is the one who wrote the dialogue for Attack of the Clones and Padme and Anakin, but nonetheless the creator gave his feedback. And Ron Howard says this: there was one beat where Han takes Qi'ra's cloak, hangs it up, and moves on to his next bit of business. But Lucas had a note. He scoffed and said, if Han would only be so bold. When asked what he meant, George said, Han wouldn't bother hanging up someone else's cloak. And then George impersonated Han. He became Han Solo for a second. The body language was there, the attitude, he embodied Han. Not only was it a nice accent on the scene, but also a reminder George is the one who created the character and really understood him, which to some, again, might be a bit of a strange statement considering the special editions changes to Han shot first, but there you go. But generally speaking, apparently George was reluctant to get too involved. He didn't want to overstay his welcome. He understood this wasn't his movie, but Han Solo was his character. And I have to say, my friends, Alden Ehrenreich did a fantastic job. He's not Harrison Ford, but I think he did fantastic, considering the hand he was dealt. And I'm happy to see him getting so much work at the moment. I recently saw the film Weapons, which was insane. If you're a horror fan, go see this movie. Alden was fantastic in it. He plays a cop, but not just any cop, not just a bad guy or a good guy. He's a human cop who makes mistakes. A troubled police officer with a complicated past connection to the teacher character. And I was watching this film and I was thinking, my goodness, Alden deserves so much better. He's crazy versatile, super talented, and I still can't believe how badly he was thrown under the bus. And look, even though Han Solo dies in The Force Awakens, just like they did Alden as a younger Han Solo instead of Harrison, they could bring him back in the Mandoverse. If they ever want to do Han Solo in the Mandalorian movie, or a future Mando movie, I'm almost certain Kathleen Kennedy wants to do a deep fake, but I think it'd be so much more poetic and extremely heartwarming if they got Alden back. So, some interesting new revelations for Solo: A Star Wars Story. Are you a fan of the film? Let me know in the comments down below. Please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and may the Force be with you, always.